and I ended up slamming into a tree, hit my leg going about 40 miles per hour and blew up my femur. I had to get like 6 to 7 reconstructive surgeries over the course of 6 years after that to kind of reheal my body. And what was powerful about that, and why this is a massive spiritual experience, is I consider my dad's death like the first big crash that kind of got me onto this fitness journey. And then the second crash of my leg basically took this whole body that I worked so much to build up and just destroyed it. And I did that. Like, I created that experience. But what it did in the process is open me up to healing, and it had made me surrender a lot of those aspects of my identity and my ego, come into acceptance that I wasn't going to look the way I used to look or be able to deadlift or squat the way I did, because it was a very serious injury. But in that, I was able to become humble, and I was able to slow down and learn how to heal. And healing came into getting parasympathetic, being able to relax, put trust and faith in something greater than my own mind and my own will.
Dr. Anthony, what role does our mindset play in our health and fitness goals? And after working with so many people, what's the biggest shift that you've seen people make that takes them from this cycle that they're constantly in to producing long-term sustainable results?
That's a wonderful question. And I'm going to start off with a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger because it feels appropriate at all times. I think Arnold says it's the mind that creates the body. It's the mind that makes you work out and train for hours every single day. And ultimately, our mindset is going to be the constellation of our motivations, our beliefs, and basically our drives in our different state. You could even say our emotional state. And that's going to influence our consistency. It's going to really be the basis of our reasons for why we get up and train. And I think over the course of time, as we continue to train, our mindset is something that consistently changes. And I'll reflect on my own life. When I was in my 20s and my teens, my mindset was that I wanted to grind really hard and I wanted to get huge. I wanted to get really big because I thought it was going to give me respect in women. And so that mindset at that time was really rooted in basically a somewhat selfish and fairly superficial aspect, but it was still a very pure drive. And that channeled me through, I'd say, about 1 to 2 decades of training and fitness. And then as I transitioned and got a little more mature, my mindset around health and fitness shifted a little more towards health and actually a little bit of cognitive optimization. I realized when I was building my business that the things I was doing with my body were going to directly translate to how sharp I was, how present I could be, how much power I had. So it added another layer of the mindset. It brought in both some of those still physical, more primal, carnal aspects of the body, but it kind of rounded it out. And as I got even more mature and became a dad myself, my mindset expanded even greater into the realm of both wanting to be healthy for my family and set a good example for my daughter, but also into the realm of the spirituality, where now for me, it's like being healthy is about living aligned with natural law, with the stuff that keeps the body healthy, eating nutritious food, hydrating, good circadian rhythm. And then also the fact that when I'm healthy, I can go be of service. So it's like these different layers that start off with this very kernel of, physical fitness can expand out. And why is that important? Well, when you have these different layers of motivation, it's going to help you be a lot more consistent and tap into deeper reasons. Like there might be a day where I don't feel like working out and it's really not even that motivating. Like I don't care how big my arms are, like I did when I was in my 20s. But now I know, okay, this is actually about showing up for me as a leader in my family and in my company. Like now that's motivating. So I can tap into that and really go. And I think too, when you are training and when you have a mindset that's steeped in these maybe deeper aspects of your being, it might also change the way you actually train and exercise. So when you realize that it might not be just strictly about aesthetics, then maybe you might focus on doing different exercises and different training routines that incorporate more functional fitness or just straight getting you outside because it's good for your nervous system and your psychological balance. So ultimately, it's going to direct your programming is rooted in your mindset. Your motivation and consistency is rooted in your mindset. And then my urge for everyone is to continuously over the course of their life and progression to deepen and consciously expand that mindset into more broad areas.
Yeah, I love that, man. You gave us so much there that we can, literally unpack. And I think, one of the things I remember from our first conversation was you spend, I think, an entire month with your clients writing a why statement, like really getting to the root of why they hired you specifically. Can you maybe unpack a little bit about that process that you take your clients and the people that you work with through in uncovering beyond what the physical aesthetics is and getting deeper into whether it's the spiritual why, whether it's that legacy why? Kind of walk us through kind of, maybe some of the steps that you've been able to guide these guys through because you've had more success than most people I know in this industry with that.
For sure. And I think the fundamental premise is that in this human experience, we have these bodies. These are our body vehicles through which we experience everything. And it's a mental illusion or a fallacy of sorts to think that your physical fitness is separate from any other thing that you care about. And to understand that as humans, we do have a psychology where we want to be consistent with our deepest values. So what we help all of our clients do before they actually start our meal plan and our workouts is identify what those core values are for them that they care about. And it might be a value of being financially abundant. It might be a value of feeling like aligned in integrity. It might be a value of being massively successful. And whatever those values are, you can know those as you're listening, maybe at the top of your head, the things you actually care about, and then relate consciously how your fitness taps into all of those. Like, so how does your fitness actually help you make more money? Well, quite frankly, when you're in great physical fitness, people perceive you in a certain kind of way. If you're in a sales type situation, that can certainly be powerful. When your body is fit, now you know you can show up with more energy, presence, and confidence. And you know that you're not hitting these mid afternoon energy slumps. So you actually can perform better and you have more time in the day. So that's just an example of how fitness connects to that one value. But you could do this in every area of your life. And this is what we walk people through doing, identifying their core values and asking the conscious question, how is my fitness intimately connected to this? What we also do is work on these kind of neural patterns of pain and pleasure. These are two big levers that we pull when we're going into fitness. And it's funny because typically in the beginning stages in your teens, 20s, and maybe even early 30s, a lot of people are driven mostly through a pleasure. And what I mean by that is the desire of what it'll be like when you have that amazing body that you've dreamed of having. It's kind of moving you towards a desire. But what often happens to people when they get in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and you start to feel your age a little bit more, you start to feel the decline of the body and through its trajectory, people begin to start being motivated by, oh crap, if I don't do this, I'm going to be debilitated and I'll age like I've seen my parents go through, or I might have some cardiovascular issues. So what we do when people are young in particular is kind of future cast and say, okay, so if you're on this trajectory right now, what's it going to look like in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And is this the course you want to be on? And if not, let's really feel that pain, feel where that could go, because experiencing that pain and the emotion in the present moment when you're doing this reflection is actually changing yourself on a nervous system level. It's actually creating new neural associations because that's what that experience is. It's literally a neural groove of memory and emotion connecting that connection. So we want to start to shift those and groove in the way that we want to groove. And it's strictly just a bias of the human nervous system where we're really good at responding to short-term threats, but we basically ignore long-term issues because we only have so much energy. So we bias to the short term. And with health, it's a long-term game. So this is why we need to take the time to effectively future cast out with both pain and pleasure, as well as align with our core values. And then this all seems pretty abstract, and I guess it is, but they're basically simple questions that you answer. And then we like to solidify them down into a mission statement where someone writes down what they actually care about, where they're heading, if they have a short-term goal, what that is, and what they know they're consciously giving up to go there, what the costs are. The costs are waking up at 5 a.m. 3 times a week to go to the strength training gym, to make sure that I don't buy the chips, at the grocery store, and to make sure we tune into this podcast a couple times a week for motivation. Basically getting super conscious. We're bringing all this stuff that can be running us unconsciously and we're bringing it to the conscious. And I'll go with this Carl Jung quote, and I think it's really relevant to this conversation, is most people will fail to basically observe the unconscious in the shadow, and it will run their lives unconsciously, and they will call it fate. So what we're doing is making the unconscious conscious, and now we're going to be able to use that to direct us in a very powerful way.
I literally shared that quote to my IG story yesterday. I saw it across the feed, and I was just like, it was resonating with a conversation I had previously with people. So it's so funny that it's bringing it back here because I know a lot of people that are going to hear this would have seen that on my page. I want to touch on spirituality because you kind of mentioned it here at the beginning. I know we talked briefly on the last episode that we had, John, which, guys, if you didn't check that one out, make sure after this one to go click down on the link below, episode 99 from November of 2021, where we unpacked Anthony's story. We talk more about the human optimizations side of things, but we'll link that down there for you guys below. But let's talk about the role of spirituality and how our fitness plays into whether, we're not whether or not we're going to succeed in spirituality, because I don't think it's a win-loss kind of battle that we're fighting there, but what role does overall health and wellness play in our pursuits of spirituality and just finding deeper faith and meaning in this life?
Man, this is like my favorite topic, and I'm glad we're kind of going here. And I think this is going to resonate with anyone listening here, regardless of what your belief system is or a particular religion that you follow. Ultimately, I think that every being here has a desire to feel whole and expressed. And whole meaning, like, that's where the word health actually comes from. It comes from like the old Germanic, health means wholeness. And so we're seeking wholeness. And I think this is where we realize there's different aspects of ourselves. There's physical health, There could be mental health, which means that we're like, we have good sharpness, we have good emotions, that maybe mental, emotional health. There's that dimension. And then I think spiritual health is where we feel aligned on all levels, where we're not doing things that run contrary to our deep values, and that we're using our body in a way that is congruent with a life that feels aligned. It's like we have this conscience where we all have a sense of like what's good for us and how much are we living in accordance to that and how much are we deviating from that. And what's amazing about the body is it has these different neurochemicals and chemistry that can lead us into addictive patterns or non addictive patterns. And certainly, people listening to this have had a deep understanding of a lot of that neurochemistry, especially as it relates to things like porn, sex addiction, et cetera. And this is where I think the body and the body vehicle itself is an expression of helping us become more spiritually aligned. When we break free from these conditionings and patterns, and when we use our body constructively in a way that is aligned for us in our value system, and also eventually in service of other people, now we're making the body a spiritualized experience. Now we can understand that breaking through a porn addiction is not just because I have a concept of it's not good for me or having ED issues or I just know I don't want to do this. It's the deeper cut of this is you're actually using your body now and you're expressing your will and you're breaking through proper steps so that you can have something that is free and liberated. We don't want to feel chained. We don't want to feel chained and trapped by, you can say lower base desires, or even it could be gluttony, it could be sex expression, it could be an overexpression of greed. So the body is the vehicle through which we experience all of this. And now, if you do have a deeper, like metaphysical cut to this, and you have a sense of God or source, and maybe even a specific relationship to that, I mean, I think in every basic spiritual text that I've read and seen, there's effectively the concept that the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit idea. The idea that this body is the physicality through which we experience ourselves as in our consciousness and our awareness and our being. And so, insofar as we can align all these things and be able to express our will and have good energy, it's great. Like you don't feel as optimized when you need to wake up in the morning, chug a bunch of energy drinks, and then feel groggy and shake off the cobwebs. Like we feel best when our nervous system is regulated and we're able to get up, feel good, feel on purpose. And it's not like we feel like that all the time, but if you can get that to trend most of the time. And then the next thing I'll say before we start to unpack some of this is I believe the spiritualization of the body is largely driven by maintaining a parasympathetic nervous system tone. When we are in parasympathetic and the body is relaxed, it's rested, we feel connected, we have a nervous system chemistry of peace, joy, and connection. And that's like what they say, at least I'll quote the Bible, like the fruits of the spirit are effectively peace, joy, love, connection. And like that's basically the experience of a parasympathetic nervous system. And the more that we lie, the more that we are stressed, the more that we're living out of alignment, the more we procrastinate, the more we eat the wrong foods, we are shifting our nervous system out of that peaceful base state. And then we experience it as anxiety, as mood swings, as lack of energy and vitality. So this is where all of your choices of all of your inputs of how you move, you sleep, you eat feeds into a nervous system balance, which feeds into a central alignment, which feeds into this concept of health and wholeness. So it's inextricably linked. It just comes down to, are you going to take the time to really realize this? And I think if you do, this may be one of the most foundational and motivating aspects of your mindset to date, beyond just the body or the abs. This is like a process of leading yourself constantly towards greater levels of wholeness. And then in your wholeness, being there in your family, in your community, in your business, in your service, others are going to see your light and come along in their own way. So like, man, how cool is that? I even got chills saying that, just the possibility of this generative goodness that comes from tending your body really well.
Dude, it's just lighting me up, man. I'm so glad we're here right now. I want to stay here for a little bit, but this is playing out, the last 5, 6 years of my life. I reached the top of the physical world, peak some, a level of physical achievement that 99.999% of the world would never be able to attain. But at the top there, I was empty and I was like just dark inside. And it was not until I got aligned with who God had created me to be. And now, I took a break away from health and fitness. I literally stepped away from the gym to align myself spiritually. And now, since I've entered back into kind of the world and I'm looking at maybe competing again next year, we'll kind of see how that plays out. But it's like now I feel like I'm operating on a whole new level in stratosphere because it's both of those now are fully operating at the highest level. So I hope you don't mind me asking this question. I'm sure you're going to be okay with it. But can you maybe talk about a little bit of your personal experience through this spiritual journey? Was there a point in your life where you were maybe somewhat aligned? And how did you begin to find that alignment and how did things change for you physically, maybe family wise, relationship wise, business wise, and just all encompassing general there?
Totally. And this will be nice because I'll be able to loop back and share a little bit of personal story. And I'm going to relate a lot to, you and your physical competition and your locus of self-belief, because I also competed in bodybuilding for many years, and this will tie in. So for those that haven't yet listened to the original episode of my story, I had a unique childhood in that my dad was very sick growing up, and he basically busted his butt to provide for us, and he ended up dying very young at just 42 years old. And I was 9 when I watched him die. And as you can imagine, it's a very dark period of my life after that. A lot of confusion, a lot of hurt and pain. And, I had a certain concept of God and higher power at that time, although it wasn't a mature spirituality, but it brought me into a dark place of asking a lot of questions like, God, if you're here, how could this happen to my dad? Like, what is the plan purpose here? Like, why? And it got me into a fairly dark place, but I was able to channel that through exercise, a lot of that angst and emotion into exercise and fitness. And I realized that when I started to train and put that energy out in a constructive way through my body, through weightlifting, through running, I started to feel better and I started to heal. So the beginning stages of that was building myself up through the physical. And in the process of that, though, especially as I got more competent and I started to have more success, and I was high school, I was one of the jack kids in high school because I've been training for so long at that point. I started to believe in my ego a lot more. My ego was strengthening through this tremendously. And this is, I think, where a lot of us in our fitness journeys in the early time, we honestly start to kind of worship our bodies in the sense that it is the all consuming thing that we're tailoring everything to optimize the body. And we're always looking at maybe not our current self, but that idea of that dream. That is the logos. That's what we're aiming at. This idea of the perfect kind of body. And that drove me for a lot of time. I mean, from my teens throughout my 20s, I was a competitive bodybuilder for over 10 years, did many, many shows and had some success. But all along, it was always about more and more and more. And God was not at the center of my life. There was not a spiritual concept. I was honestly had made my own body a sense an idol. And what was amazing about this experience is as I built my ego and I was in my last year of medical school, I went on a skiing trip with one of my friends, and we were just like, we were ripping. Him and I had been good skiers. He's a snowboarder, and we were just going really hard and fast, like total testosterone, ego skiing. And I had an intuition I needed to slow down that day, but I totally ignored it. And I ended up slamming into a tree, hit my leg going about 40 miles per hour and blew up my femur, and had to get like 6 to 7 reconstructive surgeries over the course of 6 years after that to kind of reheal my body. And what's powerful about that and why this is a massive spiritual experience is I consider my dad's death like the first big crash that kind of got me onto this fitness journey. And then the second crash of my leg basically took this whole body that I worked so much to build up and just destroyed it. And I did that. Like I created that experience. But what it did in the process is open me up to healing, and it had made me surrender a lot of those aspects of my identity and my ego, come into acceptance that I wasn't going to look the way I used to look or be able to deadlift or squat the way I did because it was a very serious injury. But in that, I was able to become humble, and I was able to slow down and learn how to heal. And healing came into getting parasympathetic, being able to relax, put trust and faith in something greater than my own mind and my own will, which was driving me through my fitness time. And this was the inward turning path where I actually found my way back to God. And what was fascinating is I started through meditation, almost like a lot of just general Eastern approach to meditation, where I guess I just learned how to sit still, and I desired to quiet my mind and experience more joy and peace, and actually activate some of the energy in my body and learn how to direct it and heal. And I experienced a lot of that, and I meditated very intensely for, I don't know, it's been since that time, but it was probably like almost like twice a day for years. But what was amazing in the process of all that is I found my way back to a connection with my Christian roots in Jesus. And that was like an unexpected turn because I thought I was on this path of effectively like enlightenment, but I ended up finding Christ, or I guess Christ found me in this process. And I'm not here to preach Christianity to everyone listening. It just happened to be my path of coming back full circle and understanding my original kind of like Christian roots that I was brought up in, but in a such deeper concept because I began to experience God within myself and the stillness of my mind and my heart. And as I'm having this decrease of my attachment to my own ego and my body image, I'm having an increase in this feeling of love, service, and connection with everyone. Whereas before it was like I thought I was this guy, Anthony, that was this stud young guy building a business and trying to build my body up. And now, after being so deconstructed through this painful experience, I felt like, I am a child of the living God, like an expression here to be loving and to surrender And I didn't feel like I'm as much directing my life as my life is almost being directed and it's moving through me. And this is a fascinating thing because when you're into fitness, it's a lot of it's about strengthening your will and exerting that will in the context of a plan and taking action. And that's a valuable skill, but I don't believe that's the highest way to live. I think there's a higher way to live where you're almost a little more surrendered. You're still taking action and driving hard, but you're understanding that life is moving through you and as you, and not just through you as the concept of a circumscribed small ego. You are so much more than that. And I experienced that in my direct experience. And now it's imbibed in all the things that I do. Now, the work I do with Fit Father Project and Fit Mother Project is rooted in the heart of service and being good to my fellow man because I know my heart. And so I know that same heart lives in everyone else, whether or not they consciously see it at this point or not. And then becoming a father was another big portal to step through. It's such an amazing thing if someone hasn't experienced this to be able to meet your kid for the first time. As my daughter Brooke came out, it's like the first relationship you have, at least in my experience, where it already started off at 10 out of 10. I was just floored at the amount of love I felt, the amount of humility for just like the gift of life, and the fact that there's just baked into this little girl is a whole lifetime of memories and experiences and lessons and just like love for me to unfold. So the parent threshold was a really beautiful thing. And now I'd say also in my business and how I spend my time is I'm able to feel like kind of like to walk in the path that Jesus walked of as like the supreme example of the servant leader, one who's living aligned with God's principles and is trying to bring more love and light into the world.
God, I love that so much, man. And I appreciate you opening up and being, just real and vulnerable about that entire journey, how it shaped you, how it's brought you back to Christ and all of that. I mean, God, the audience is gonna, guys, if you did go back and just listen to that last couple of minutes again, just incredibly powerful. I want to talk about that accident, maybe how it changed some of your training. You mentioned at the time, obviously driven by ego, bodybuilder, I'm assuming it's just like go, 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 go. How did that kind of wake you up and what changes do you have to make, in your training from that accident?
I will say I'm very fortunate too that I spent so much time doing, classic heavy, power building, both like powerlifting and bodybuilding style training for years because it possibly saved my life to have had the size quads that I did when I hit that tree and just to have the physical vitality to be able to recover from that. So it all feels like kind of purposeful in that front. And what I realized from having such a severe injury is I think I didn't respond to it in any way, shape, or form as darkness. I almost embraced it immediately as a chance to heal and to create anew. And I think that's what I learned from my dad's, experience of my dad dying is you must take what life gives you, and then those are the colors that you're painting with. It's like you don't always get choices on these really significant moments that you have, but you can make something of them. So I chose to respond to my dad's death by making it into fitness, and then I chose from the leg accident, like right afterwards. It's like, man, I'm going to document and journal this process and share it and make this really about profound healing because it is. And spend as much time doing training in my mind and my emotions and practicing forgiveness as I could in the body, especially in the early days when I couldn't train. But even I think like probably 2 weeks after the initial surgeries, I had broke my arm too, so I had a cast on. I was still trying to do things that I could, always through injury, is always trying to do things that you still can do, and realizing that your bar is constantly changing. And you can't compare yourself to what was possible. So I had a little pec deck fly and I would do stuff like that. I could do some small ab work. And of course, like the process of rehabbing a body so significantly, you get really deep into nutrition. I've had multiple stem cell treatments. I've used PEMF pads and acupuncture. And so you just like learn to basically try all different things. But I think more importantly than the physical, which I can talk more about the rehab and all that process if you like, is balancing the emotions of desire for better and for improvement, as well as direct acceptance of what is. And I kind of reflect on this too, even in my bodybuilding days. Like I, I, I have, like most of us can relate. Like you probably have some areas of your body where you have some good genetics and other areas where you don't. And I remember I was so upset when I was a young bodybuilder and I idolized like, Arnold and some of these guys. And I had like these bicep insertions that were kind of short, not great biceps. And I would like go to my mom and I think I was crying one day, like how after doing curls for years, how I never have good biceps. And that was a powerful thing to even recognize and come into acceptance of my body, of like what is actual possible while still having desire to really move forward. Same thing in a healing injury. You can't deny what is. You have tendonitis, you have a broken bone, you have a shoulder that tends to have issues. But then you need to also understand that you can work around that in other ways. You can still accept it without denying it, but be tactical about the kind of plan. So when I was recovering my leg, I did a lot of upper body lifting. It also got me acquainted with some really cool technologies of different things that can help train. There's a device called a new fit, a newbie new fit. It's like one of the most powerful electrical muscle stimulation devices that I used. And that was really great for healing and connecting my nervous system. So in every challenge that you do have, in that seed of that challenge is a whole bunch of different lessons, learnings, and unlocks that you would never experience otherwise. And if you lean into those, you can find a lot of meaning in that. And I'll tell you this, regardless of how hard charging and invincible you may feel at this point in your life, take it from a guy who's worked with 100,000 people over 40. Eventually, shit's going to start breaking down just from wear and tear and old age. And I think this is just a part of the life experience in the process that our bodies go through a trajectory of coming to a peak and then a decline. And I almost feel like the decline, at least on the spiritual aspect, is the more important part. Yes, to still strive and to want to be as healthy as you can at every subsequent decade, but also to come into acceptance of the fact that life is constantly variable. Everything has a peak and then it comes into a trough, and that we do return these bodies back to the earth, and finding acceptance in that process is very powerful.
Yeah, for me, it's chest and biceps, man. Very similar. I have a very similar build to the man himself, Arnold. Like I was gifted with just this ability to put size and keep leanness in my chest. I remember I had a friend that was like, we were in our late 20s and we both were in a bulk phase, and we used to wear these cut off t-shirts, and he would get these kind of like fat pouches on the side of his chest. I'd be 15, 18% body fat, but I'd still have this roundness to my chest. He's like, dude, I don't know what do you have that I don't have? And it was just that's the gift that I had. And I hear you talk about, the quads that saved you. That's always been a challenge for me, is really putting a lot of size, because I'm 6'3", got really long femurs there. So it's always been challenging for me. We'll circle back to parasympathetic and sympathetic. We've kind of thrown that word around there quite a bit. For somebody that's maybe not, versed in this terminology, obviously we're talking fight or flight here, obviously. What can people be looking for to understand if they're sympathetic and or parasympathetic? And if they recognize that they're constantly in a sympathetic state, what are some of those practical tools that we can begin to now pull these levers on to get us into that constantly parasympathetic state?
Beautiful. And let's talk about this even at like a higher philosophical level. In many cultures, there's been the concept of the yin and the yang. We have the idea of the rest balanced with the activity. And it's mirrored in just the cycles of light on this planet. Like we have the daytime and into the nighttime. And the nervous system also is bifurcated with these two kinds of modes. We have the very active mode where the heart rate is elevated, blood pressure is elevated. We're looking to increase exercise output, and we're decreasing immune system function because we're not looking at responding to long term threats. That is a sympathetic drive. It is what we experience when we take stimulants. It's what we experience when we get very scared, when we get anxious, when we go sprint or we do something highly activating. That is the go mode for the nervous system. And it is very important for health in the human system to be able to go into go mode and to be able to maintain that and to have high output, but to return immediately back to baseline. And that is the baseline when we're relaxed and we're able to rest, is the parasympathetic mode of the nervous system. And this is literally like mirrored physically. Like we have branches of the nervous system that have different bundles of nerves and that go out into the different organs and body systems, and are also rooted in different brain patterns and brain waves that dictate whether we're in the relaxed state, the parasympathetic, or the fight or flight state, or just the aggressive state, or the explosion state. And so training is really cool because it's a chance to get into a sympathetic hard charging drive. But we all know, those of us that exercise, is it's actually the growth and the repair that happens in the parasympathetic aspect of the system. And in fact, if anyone's done a fitness contest prep and your body's in a constantly stressed state from a high level of exercise, from low calories, which is also a stress for the body, and on top of that, stimulants, you are going to be in a state where your body's not very healthy, even though you're losing body fat. That is an overly sympathetic drive, and eventually it burns you out. And it can lead to all sorts of fatigue, nutrient deficiencies, stress, anxiety, trouble sleeping. So the longest living creatures on the planet and the longest living humans can maintain a predominantly parasympathetic tone. And can be largely just experienced through your breath and through your heart rate. This comes from a little bit of the yogi Eastern philosophy, but they basically say if you can get to the point where you're taking around 6 breaths per minute, so that means you're having an inhale exhale cycle that is around 10 seconds, you're going to live a very, very long life. This is like this means you're breathing deep and slow, because the first thing that changes when you're in a sympathetic state is your heart rate increases and your respiration rate increases. And if you're out in public next time and you look, or maybe you're on an airplane, you can just start to look and watch the people next to you and see how many breaths they're roughly taking per minute. Most people on average are going to have, most Americans are probably going to be 12 up to 20 respirations per minute. And it's because their cardiovascular system has to work more. They're not getting these complete breaths. And we know from this whole field of people doing different kind of breath work stuff, Wim Hof, that we can use the breath to tap into these different branches of the nervous system and create a lot of relaxation. Another good analogy to think about this is the longest living creatures on the planet maintain a parasympathetic tone. And the shortest living creatures are in sympathetic fight or flight. So part of this is genetics, but a lot of it's because sympathetic does not coincide with a long life. Like a mouse lives for 18 months. A tortoise can live for 108 years or longer. And the tortoise is just chilling. It's eating lettuce. It's super slow. It has an armored shell, not worried about anything eating it. It's in a parasympathetic dominant tone. The mouse is freaking out all the time, worried about all sorts of things killing it, constantly looking for food, fast metabolism, lots of stress hormones. So that creature is in sympathetic tone. And what's amazing about the human system is we can do physical inputs to help tonify the nervous system. So things like using sauna or cold plunge or exercise, these are things that get us into a sympathetic tone and then return us back to baseline. Like that's very powerful and very healing. But more importantly, I think it's the impact of our stimulant use as well as our just mental emotional scripts and patterns and how we relate to our life. This is why when a lot of people start to meditate or get into prayer or even have some kind of spiritual religious awakening where they kind of surrender that concept of I need to be in control and get into that kind of trust, they find that they feel so much better because the nervous system is perceiving safety. It can relax, it can put the guard down, and this is exactly experienced as a parasympathetic tone. Now, if you have one of these aura rings or any kind of monitor or tracker of some sort, one of the main biological indicators of a parasympathetic tone is called heart rate variability, HRV, which is basically the fact that your heart is constantly beating. And you can almost think of it as your heart has a certain number of beats in your lifetime. And the more that's constantly driving through a increased sympathetic stressed rate, you're kind of like taking up those heartbeats, if you will. And the fact that when you're in a parasympathetic tone, those heart rate beats are not as continuous. They're not like a perfect metronome that's like boom, 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 boom. Like that's my attempt at perfect. Good HRV is where it's more like boom, 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 boom. It's like has more variability in that. And that heart rate, when the parasympathetic tone is activated, is effectively going to be give you more of that variability. Now, the main nerve that drives the parasympathetic nervous system tone is the vagus nerve. And what's amazing about this nerve is it literally runs from your brain through your heart to your digestive system, which is this sacred connection between these three powerful energy centers that we do have: the brain, the heart, in the gut. And the vagus nerve is going to help dictate and keep those things in healthy alignment. And when you are in a sympathetic tone, at rest all the time because you're stressed out or using too many stimulants, it naturally affects your digestive system. Where do people feel like they feel anxiety? In their stomachs, that pit in the stomach feel. What happens when people are too stressed out? They can get stomach ulcers, literally, which is a change in like the actual mucosa of the stomach, or indigestion or issues. And then the heart too, right? The heart beats so much faster, and then the mind feels more stressed. So we can do a lot of things nutritionally with exercise, but also with breathing and meditation to maintain parasympathetic. I feel like that's enough of a high level primer, and then we can drill down wherever you want to go.
No, that's great, man. Do you follow modern day bodybuilding at all? Like the
I
current
do.
Mr. Olympia?
I just watched the last Mr. Olympia. Yeah.
Yeah, so Derek Lunsford. So
Yep.
quick story here. Derek moved down to Tampa in 2017 to train
Hmm.
with Ben Polkowski at MI40. I was training with
Nice.
Ben. I was helping run some workshops over there at the gym
Cool.
at the time. Derek comes down, starts training with this small little group that we had. And Ben was called the bodybuilding yogi back then. He was talking about some of these concepts back in 2014, 2015. Like he used to take us through mindfulness meditation practices after our training sessions. He pointed something out about Derek because he had this slow, calm demeanor. I mean, he would get off of a set of like squatting 405. He would just be chilling. He said, watch this kid because his nervous system operates at a different level than everybody else. He called it back then that just genetically, he had this ability to just constantly be in a parasympathetic state. For those that don't know, Derek was a 212 Mr. Olympia champion. And then this year he won the actual Mr. Olympia, the first person ever to take the 212 title and the Mr. Olympia title. And Ben would tell you probably massively due to obviously he's got the ability, he's got incredible work ethic, but it's this parasympathetic state. Like the dude is just chill, calm all the time. So it's so resonating that we're kind of here right now. We're talking about
Yeah.
all of this. So really,
And
really, really love.
parasympathetic is anabolic. Sympathetic is catabolic.
Mm-hmm.
All of the hormones that are released in the sympathetic nervous system are catabolic hormones. They're here to break down glucose, actually break down muscle tissue, to liberate amino acids if needed. And the parasympathetic is actually where you're getting mTORs being activated. It often happens too when you're having feeding and there's nutrient sensitivity coming in and stuff like that. So yeah, parasympathetic is key. And this is why people feel so good on the cold plunges too, because it not only does it give you the immediate dopamine hit and the norepinephrine hit, which is like kind of sympathetic, but it teaches you how to like actually calm down in the presence of a big stimulus. And I think if you can do that, you're going to live a longer and healthier life. And that's also why any mindfulness practice, meditation, prayer, anything that enables you to look at those recurring thoughts and calm the mind down is going to be key for a long, healthy life.
Yeah, we talked about, a handful of tactics here, right? Mindfulness, meditation, prayer, sauna, cold plunge therapy. In your opinion, is there a hierarchy of these? Is there things we should be prioritizing, things that we should be doing daily? And then is it like, okay, we can go maybe pull this lever once, twice a month, maybe to get the bigger bang for the buck? So kind of walk us through maybe the hierarchy of tools to get us into parasympathetic.
100%. I think that the morning and the evening time is very powerful because this is when your brain in the brainwave state is transitioning from these deeper brainwave states into the active state. And I think it's a fair time to kind of like describe the different brainwave states and kind of map them to our experience of consciousness. When we are active right now, listening to this, doing email, whatever we're doing, our brain is moving in beta waves. And these are faster moving waves and they're just basically basic alertness. When we get into like a little more of a zen state, and like you use word zen loosely, but we're kind of becoming we're still alert, but we're kind of like a little more in flow and a little more creative. Those are alpha waves, and it's literally just a slowing down of the brain waves into a slightly slower state. And what's fascinating is they find that all athletes who get into the zone, Tiger Woods is about to crush a drive, Olympic archer is about to release the arrow, they get a burst of these alpha waves. And the alpha waves are associated with a greater parasympathetic state in the body, and it opens up this whole aspect of creativity and flow. Now, when we get into a deeper meditative state, this is where the brain waves can slow even more down into theta waves. And this is where you're kind of like in between sleep and wakefulness. This is where you have a lot of creativity. This is where you can tap in and get downloads that are like beyond just your own understanding. I think this is fascinating. It was actually Thomas Edison is one of the most prolific inventors of all time. And he would have a practice where he would actually take two metal balls, like two kind of heavy metal balls, a couple pounds each, and he would go and he would sit down in his chair, a chair that he would do, and he would kind of get into a deep meditative state while holding these balls in both of his hands. And when he was falling asleep and kind of starting to nod off, the balls would release from his hands and they would fall and it would wake him up from the crash. And he would immediately write down whatever he was thinking about during that time. He's basically allowing himself to get into a theta brainwave state. And then the balls would kind of wake him up. And then whatever insights he was having, he was write down. And like that was one of his most primary important practices for creativity. And there's other inventors that do similar things in different ways. But those theta waves are active in meditation. Then finally, in deep sleep, where we get into delta waves, which are can be experienced by some people in a conscious state, but mostly it's just when you're sleeping in those states. And I bring this up to say that our experience of our awareness is dictated by the brain's pattern of electrical activity, and this slower activity is actually what we want. And here's where it's kind of poetic. So the Schumann resonance, like how much the Earth vibrates per second, is roughly around 8 hertz. So 8 cycles per second. So 8 times the Earth is doing this. You can almost do it with your hand if you move your hand really fast. Like that is the low grade vibration of the Earth that all life on this planet is attuned to. Turns out that those alpha waves into theta waves, that cutoff is right around 8 hertz, which is really amazing. Whereas the beta waves of the brain are more in like the high teens into 20s up to 30s, et cetera. So it's almost like that's where I think it kind of becomes a little spiritual and poetic, that when we get attuned to almost like the natural frequency of the Earth itself in our brain's frequency of electrical activity, this is when we feel this amazing state. And stuff that we take externally to change our state, whether it's theanine from tea, whether it's some form of cannabis, whether it's high dose magnesium, these things are literally interfacing with our brain and changing the electrical activity to get us to a state. So for those that have enjoyed marijuana and stuff like that, marijuana changes the brainwave states to get it into alpha waves. Alpha waves are highly expressed when people are high on that kind of stuff. And the cool thing is, like, you don't need external things to create that state, but that is the fact that you're experiencing these things largely due to the change in the brainwave. So what can we do to actually tap into this on a daily basis? Well, the hierarchy that you asked about, I think the first important time is during those transitionary states of consciousness, when we're either waking up early in the morning or going to bed, is prime time to do any of this mental inventory work. And it's pretty much as simple as this, in my opinion. Find a place where you can sit down. I think sitting down is important versus lying down with a straight spine. This could be in some kind of cross-legged posture, or I just have a chair. Sit down with a straight spine, relax your body, put your hands wherever you like to put them, but try to relax the whole body, close your eyes, and just allow your breath to be natural exactly as it is. And just kind of sit into feeling your body and your being, just get into a peaceful, relaxed state and just allow anything to come up. This is powerful because during these transitionary states of awareness is when a lot of the subconscious patterns programming is going to come and emerge. This is why the stuff that's in our subconscious and unconscious emerges in the form of our dreams. And this is why a lot of the great psychoanalysts like Freud and Jung were always talking about the subconscious and the unconscious and these archetypal memes effectively that come up in our awareness. You can take advantage of these every single day. And I want you to listen to this, where every single day for the rest of your life, you have these golden opportunities in the beginning transition statements, stages of your awareness to do some really deep work and reprogram. And I think that's more important than me saying, oh, go cold plunge, because effectively what you're doing is repatterning these primary patterns in this unconscious stuff through just like sitting and feeling it and being aware of whatever does come up. And you might need to take action on things like, oh, you realize something comes up that you realize that you're out of alignment with this. And then you actually need to use behavior and action to create a new, or someone pops into your mind and you realize there's something undone in this relationship and you want to reach out and forgive them. Like, you are basically doing unlocks every single time in your nervous system and in your brain's electrical activity when you process these things, and then you may choose to take action on them. But I think that's the first thing, is we need to audit our thoughts and our thinking pattern. And there's particular times in the morning, evening that are good for that. And then exercise is probably the second one, beyond just using these kind of fancier biohacking type stuff. Exercise is a chance to get yourself into a sympathetic and then bring it to parasympathetic. And now I'm thinking all of us just listening to this should try to be like Derek Lunsford and try to like be as chill as possible in between the sets and just really feel our bodies, take those deep mindful breaths between exercise. It could like almost supercharge your training and now make it even a deeper level of training than just working on your musculoskeletal system. And then the other thing that's really potent is cold. Hot is great for circulation longevity, but cold is the thing that makes your nervous system go like, oh shit. And then you have the ability to calm it down. So if you can do cold shower or cold plunge, I would say that's a pretty fast track to getting into that. And I would put that on par with breath work. Cold and breath work are the real potent tools, but the mental, emotional experience every day in the prayer meditation during those times is probably my first recommendation.
Yeah, the cold has been a game changer for me. I dabbled in some cold showers for a bit, but I'm going on almost 7 months now consecutive. And I paired with some breathing prior to getting into it, but have the cold plunge here at the house. And it's been literally like, it's been every single day, absent of like 4 days where I've traveled the last 7 months, where I've gotten in the cold ice every single morning. And like I said, I've, made a lot of these changes over many, many years. That one, boom, it like took everything to the next
Next
level.
level.
Just, yeah, absolutely, man.
Me too. I have a cold plunge. I do it every single day. And I also found that for me, with everything I had dialed in, and we are probably pretty similar, Rich, where we had like nutrition, good sleep, good training, like that's something that you add in and you notice a big distinct difference.
Immediately, day one, you notice it. So I love that. Let's touch on sleep here a little bit, because I honestly feel that for a lot of people, like they're under rested and then overstimulated. Talk about the role of sleep, just understanding circadian rhythm cycles, and maybe quick 1, 2 kind of changes that people can implement to begin to optimize their sleep.
I love this too. And this is why health has kind of become more spiritual to me. And I think my fundamental premise I'm trying to get through here in this conversation is that our bodies are most healthy when we're living in accordance with natural law. And natural law are just like the cycles of nature and creation that when we're in accordance with, we thrive. Our bodies are made up of water, just like this planet is, and roughly in the same percentages, which it's kind of poetic, I guess you could say too. So when we hydrate, we feel good. While the other kind of big natural law signal on this planet is the light signal. And so the light is one of the greatest uh, interfaces with our brain and our nervous system to tell us what to feel and what state to be in. So, like, good sleep starts in the morning by understanding that we need to be in accordance with the light and the natural rhythms. And here's basically how the flow goes every single day. When we wake up and the sun is kind of starting to come up, if we have the ability to catch sunrise and actually watch sunrise, it is phenomenally helpful for your health. When we look at the sun's light, around 45% of it is actually infrared radiation that we experience as heat. And that is very healing for our skin. And in fact, when we get infrared early in the morning on our skin, whole body sunshine, if possible, that actually primes our skin and our melanocytes to actually be more resistant to the damage of UV later in the day. And then the UV is going to help us with vitamin D. We'll get to that aspect. But if you can actually see the sunrise and get that morning sun on your skin, it's going to help you phenomenally. Get this, the morning sunshine in particular hits your eyes and actually causes your brain to release serotonin. Serotonin is that sacred neurotransmitter that makes us feel happy, connected, and secure. It's what we give people when they're depressed. We give them different kinds of drugs to increase serotonin. Your brain literally makes this in response to morning sunlight. Very, very powerful. So if you're not taking advantage of that every single day, that's a huge missed opportunity. And later in the day, as the sun goes higher and higher, and it gets to have a higher UV index, because you don't get much UV light early in the day. When the sun's like, let's say 10 a.m. to maybe like 3 or 4 p.m., it's overhead and it has the greatest amount of radiation. This is where we're actually experiencing some of the UV light. And UV light has been massively villainized, and it's a huge mistake because we actually need the UV. The only kind of light that makes vitamin D for us is UV light. And vitamin D is, I would put it in the top 3 most important hormones and signaling molecules that we know of. on this planet. Obviously, good for bones. We heard about that. Good for calcium. For men, it raises testosterone levels. Every single white blood cell on your body has a vitamin D receptor. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know, like it's that foundational. And especially going back into the whole COVID thing that people went through, the people that actually got wrecked by that had low vitamin D status. That was like the pretty much what we know now from going back in the data. The number one predictor of how well you fared to pretty much most infections is your vitamin D status. And you only make vitamin D in response to that UV light. So getting those sunshine breaks is really cool. Now, you can also take supplemental vitamin D, and I know we're talking about sleep, but the D is completely tied to the sleep conversation. The oral vitamin D supplements, I think, are very good and very helpful, and also eating high vitamin D foods like all your fish oil and stuff like that. Mushrooms have some D. But the kind that you get from the sun is called sulfated vitamin D. It's the only way you can get it. They don't sell sulfated vitamin D supplements, and they don't work in the same way. Because when light hits the cholesterol in your skin, it makes a special kind of D that travels. It's massively biologically active, and that sulfate itself helps your cardiovascular system release more nitric oxide. So you get sunshine, you actually get greater NO production naturally. Like take any super pump 260 product you want. Like this is the way that we're meant to do it. Nose breathing and sunshine to increase NO levels. Now, what's cool is when we get morning sunshine and we get that serotonin production, that gets converted later in the day to melatonin. When the light starts to go down and our brain and our eyes being an extension of the brain senses that there's lower ambient light, we make melatonin. And melatonin is so freaking important. It's not just a sleep supplement that you take to prevent jet lag. Pretty much all of your white blood cells also have melatonin receptors. Melatonin is the main signal in your brain that triggers your brain to clean itself. Melatonin helps your good gut bacteria actually proliferate. It actually heals up leaky gut and inflammation in the GI tract. Melatonin is made in the pineal gland, which is the sacred gland in the middle of the brain that all these ancient cultures have talked so much about, and it's massive and important. But also, it's made in the digestive tract. And the couple things that crush melatonin production are bright light, and then the artificial light we get from phones and screens, particularly in the blue light spectrum. So my number one thing for people to go into is when the sun is down in your area, make your house darker. Like get lower lights, start using more lamps, get the lights down insofar as you can make your home environment paired out with the light that's naturally out in the environment. You are going to have better sleep. You're going to be healthier. Your immune system is going to be stronger. Your melatonin production is going to be better. And we do want some blue light. Guess what color the sky is? The sky is blue because during the day, this is the kind of wavelength of light that's reflected into our eyes that makes us feel active and energized. Blue light is very good for us when the sky is blue. When the sky is no longer blue because it's dark outside, this is when we need to get into accordance with the sun's rhythm. So I hope you're seeing like how freaking poetic this is. The actual colors that our eyes perceive as visible light are the exact frequencies that trigger the exact proper biological mechanisms at the right times. And when we get out of sync with this in any way, shape, or form, our health suffers to a certain degree. And guess what blue light does? At night, it is a stress for the body. It activates the sympathetic nervous system because you're giving an activity signal during a time when your body's supposed to be relaxed. So things like blue blocking glasses or taking your phone and getting it on that orange night shift mode are all very foundational. But I think this is fascinating too. Your skin literally has the same blue light receptor protein called melanopsin that your eye has. So even if you have blue light blockers, but you're blasting your skin with that, your body still has clock genes that are being influenced by the light. So this system is deep and it's poetic, and you got to mirror basically the light in the ambient environment.
Yeah, so all you inventors out there, somebody come up with some blue light pajamas for people out there and
Yeah.
crush it.
Shielding pajamas.
Billionaire idea. I'm just sitting here selfishly like, thank you, Dr. Anthony, for confirming and making me not feel bad about taking an afternoon walk every single day because it's been a staple in my life. We have a part of our program, so we run a small little walk challenge. We have, it's just something we kind of do to our guys. But due to the nature of the work and the podcast and the coaching, I've been able to kind of create a lifestyle where it's like most afternoons, I'd say 80% of the time I can get out at that ideal time to get the sunlight, to get the walk in, to get the movement. And it's been game changing, man. When I go, a week or two without it, where it's been maybe not as consistent, I can feel a little bit of a dip just in my overall sense of well-being. And that's when I'll kind of maybe pull out some of the supplementary vitamin D. So just once again, just love how we're confirming all these things.
And I'll say this too, the combination of the UV light plus the cold actually activates your mitochondria and makes them work better. And ultimately, all these things we do, all the food that we eat, the exercise that we do, it does come down to our cells and our ability to use mitochondria to make ATP. And the sunshine in the middle of the day with the UV and cold both makes that system work better. So
yeah,
that's
so
cool.
I walk the pup in the morning, and then my cold plunge is set in on my patio to where it almost like it overlooks the horizon. I can kind of see the sun, so I'll be sitting there chilling, like my face just above the sun. It's just getting blasted with the sun. So I love all this, man. Talk a little bit about your business, man, as we're kind of, maybe bring it to a close here in the next, 10 or 15 minutes or so. Looking at what you've built here with both the Fit Father and the Fit Mother Project, and you built an empire in the fitness space that most coaches would probably never even be able to wrap their head around. What do you think has been the biggest thing that you've been able to do that's contributed to the success at scale that you've had?
Well, I think there's like so many people that know a ton about health and fitness, like have wonderful chops and may even know a lot more than I do. What I really did well was I understood and doubled down on like the business side of the game. Like anyone who's creating anything, health or fitness business related, like you need to learn and understand digital marketing, content creation, and then the act of being consistent with all of that stuff. And that's what I did. I started over a decade ago, so I've had a nice runway to build it up. And it was a slow build. Like it took me years and years to get traction, but I was able to apply that same discipline that I learned from fitness about working a plan, being consistent, knowing that results are going to come into the future, but hard work starts today, and do that to build up a lot of runway of content. And I also have like a very compelling reason for why I do what I do. And I've imbibed that spirit into the characteristic. Like I think when people see my Fit Father and Fit Mother content, they can realize that this isn't a guy that's just doing this to sell me a program or just because he wants to glorify himself as some kind of fitness influencer. This is a guy who genuinely cares about this at a deep level and wants to help me because I do. And I think that's where the heart of service that's been cultivated through my own healing journey is now transmitted as like the subtext of what we do. So I think there's a degree of authenticity in the content that comes through. And I think everyone can kind of tell when someone is really on it and doing it for an authentic emergent reason as opposed to doing it out of their own ego. So that's something I think that comes through. I learned technology, and I'm not just talking about like, social media blogs and videos. Like I was able to build our own like learning platforms, and I basically started to build like learn WordPress websites, and I got kind of nerdy on that stuff to do some like basic web coding and basic graphic design. And that was huge for me because it enabled me when I didn't have any money to actually like use my time and build and create stuff that otherwise would have cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I was able to get scrappy because I was willing to learn. And that gave me a ton of power to create very quickly. Because I think it's a tough place where you have a lot of desire and you want to do something, but there are these hurdles to be able to execute it because you have knowledge gaps. I did a good job of filling those in, and I was able to build our first websites, build our programs, like learn all the web tech stuff. And now I don't have the privilege of not doing that now, but because I did, I could create a lot more and a lot faster. And there's a benefit to being small and not being a big giant because you can be more nimble. Like now, like when we want to do stuff with the company because we have many people working and many moving parts, like it takes longer to execute than it did when it was just me cranking on stuff. So there's a blessing to getting up and going on this. And you need to learn pricing, you need to learn marketing. And I'd say one other thing is you need to create one really good, compelling offer. Like you need one hero offer. You need one thing that's like your main coaching program, your main book, your main thing. And like too many people get scattered all over the place. We built our main thing for Fit Father was this front end 30-day program that does the mission statement, the nutrition, the meal plan, the workouts, the accountability. And we built that up. And then we started to move over to Fit Mother. And then we moved to other products. So we took it in a very serial way. And it was mostly me. I say we because I ended up getting a right hand man a couple years into the journey, but I was the one that kind of started all that stuff. And it's been a heck of a ride. I think realizing that business is one of my greatest vehicles for personal development and now one of my greatest levers to be able to serve and connect with people. I mean, the fact that I have a business gives me the great benefit of being able to come on here and have such a cool conversation with you because people see what I'm doing and like they're like, that's cool. I'd love to connect with you. So there's so much promise to creating things, and we have the power to do that in today's day and age. And the greatest superpower, as one of my friends says, is like the fact that you can be authentically you. So Fit Father Project is what emerged out of my life experience. This coaching, this podcast, all your work with porn and men emerged out of yours. So, I think everyone's got to kind of figure out what their natural DNA is, whether that DNA includes good chest genetics, bad chest genetics, or like whatever your even
Or good
gifts are
quads.
too, leaning into your natural gifts and predispositions. Like I have a fair natural gift for communicating in written word and spoken word. So I leaned into that and shot a lot of video. But if you're someone that has a lot of analytical gifts or creative artistic gifts, I think leaning into those is probably your fast path to success.
Yeah, so many key lessons there for anybody out there, early on in business, maybe thinking about wanting to take the leap there into entrepreneurship. Start small, learn it yourself, make these mistakes because it enables the ability to hire skill later on down the road because you've made some of those mistakes and you can identify hiring the right people, making those necessary decisions. And I think just speaking to your authenticity, of who you are, I mean, it's clearly come out. I hope the audience has clearly resonated with here today. Every single question I personally asked about you, it's somehow been geared back towards serving the audience today at a much higher level. So appreciate everything. And it's just been an absolute honor. And just, I love every single time that we get to connect here. You Yeah, you do a vast majority of work with, older men, Fit Father Project, obviously guys into their 40s. We're going to have, a good amount of men that are going to hear this maybe in their mid to late 20s, even in the early 30s. What's maybe one, two lifestyle, health, fitness changes that they need to be making now to ensure that when they step into 40, I turned 40 just a couple months ago, feeling better than ever. It's like, I don't feel 40, I feel 30 in a 40-year-old body because I started planting these seeds early on in my 20s. So for the guys out there right now, one, two kind of quick lifestyle health changes that they need to be making right now to ensure when they turn that clock into 40, it's like now they're beginning to really thrive and excel.
Love it. And I'll be actually brief for once on these questions. One is mobility work. You don't feel like you need to do it now, but you'll want to do it once you feel like you have knees that are a little older, shoulders a little older. So, like, really get into a lot of these great places online on YouTube where there's so many great PTs and different people that are showing you how to like bulletproof your knees and shoulders. Like, don't skip that stuff. Go deep into that. Maybe even dedicate a whole day per week to doing this kind of stuff with leg, knee, shoulder rehab. Like, the quality of your main joints, your spine, your knees, your shoulders, your back is going to dictate your quality of your life older and what you can and can't do with training. And a lot of guys end up accumulating injuries around this period that end up haunting them for a long period of time. So prioritize mobility work as much as heavy lifting. It is always a good idea to take an extra day of rest between a heavy lift. Like, it's not like you're missing out on mad gains by taking another day of recovery and focusing on that. That's one thing I'll say. Two is actually start to focus more on ingredient quality and food quality. I think when we're young and oftentimes we don't have as much funds and money, we're just kind of like really focused on like macros and we're not thinking as much about ingredient quality. But you're going to come to realize, especially as your body gets a little older and your digestive system naturally probably gets a little more sensitive. And when the same foods you ate in your 20s are not exactly working for you in the same way in your 30s, let alone 40s, 50s, 60s, that you got to start eating cleaner foods. Eat a simple diet. I mean, you might not have a lot of money for the fancy stuff necessarily, but focus on a lot of meats and fish, of meats, fish, poultry, like all those proteins, eggs of the highest quality you can get. When you can buy organic, get organic, and try not to get too many things with a lot of processed sugars or artificial sweeteners and stuff like that. Like, you may not experience the health damaging effects of that now, but that will show up later. Is one thing. And then I'd say what you're going to realize as you get older is that if you're still doing drinking and like hard drugs and you feel like you can get away with that now, like there's going to be a runway there where it's really going to start to negatively impact you. So insofar as you can maybe be motivated from this conversation today to tighten some of those things up and realize that it's deeper than just what you can do to get away with for like short-term fun, that there's a deeper spiritual aspect and that, you do things now and it's going to affect your body later. I would start to reel those in if they're not already reeled in completely, because that's just not going to be sustainable over the long run. And especially when you have greater levels of responsibility and family and you want to create more in your life. Like, I mean, you could probably take it from me. Like, I'm a successful guy on many levels, and Frank the same way. Like, we're living some pretty dialed in lifestyles. And it's not to say we don't have fun, but I would start to curtail that pretty soon.
Absolutely, guys. And on the mobility front, if you didn't, go back and listen to Dr. Grayson Wickham a few weeks back. We'll link it down there in show notes for you guys as well. But we did an entire hour-long episode on the importance of it, practical steps, how to apply some of these things, and then we linked his app down there as well. So we'll have all that for you as well. Dr. Anthony, what's kind of forefront life, business? What are you looking forward to? As we're kind of closing out 2023, anything big coming in 2024 for you, the business, the family?
For sure. Well, I have like a 2-year-old daughter, so it's a really fun season of life to see her grow and develop, and just like amazing to see the beauty of like the human development and human experience. So creating a lot of good memories with her and leaning more into her interests as she gets more sophisticated is beautiful. I'm really hard charging on the business. Like, we have wonderful programs. I'm going to write and publish a book next year. So that'll be good to get the written word out to more people on what this is and speak to a lot more people in person. We just released our mobile apps for Fit Father and Fit Mother. So those are on the App Store now, which is really cool. Now, those are paid apps. So if you're stoked on this, those are actually apps that are for people who have like a subscription to our things, but they're there. And it's really amazing to see our community thriving on those apps and leaning into that. And then we're gathering people in person, because what I'm seeing coming down the pipeline is, look, there's a lot of things changing on the technology aspect of things, like, AI and many things like this. But as all that maybe comes down the pipeline, whatever that ends up looking like, whether you have like a fitness, like Ask Jeeves kind of person in your pocket that's giving you all your info. We're still humans and we still want to connect. We still want to be with one another in deep conversations. We want to be with each other in beautiful places outside. Yeah, that's like an important thing that it can't be really replaced by technology. So I'm leaning more into that. We're gathering our community more across the United States and across the world in shared experiences. We're doing some service trips, building some houses next year, gathering people for different events. And I'm just leaning into like the gathering of community in person because I think that's something that is really important and it touches on something that can't be replaced by any kind of tech progression.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And no, the need for real human connection is irreplaceable, right? So, absolutely, absolutely love what you guys are doing there, and we'd love to have you back on next year when the book is out, ready to release. Participate in that. And if it's not, man, I just want to connect with you as much as we possibly can because I just love all these conversations that we have. So, where do you want to point the guys? What's the best place to learn more about you, the work? Is there a specific funnel we want to run them to, or a specific social media site? You tell them where the best place is to just get more about what we talked here today, and more about the work that you're doing with Fit Father.
Our best social media by far is our YouTube channel. So you can find us at Fit Father Project on YouTube or Fit Mother Project. We have a lot of amazing videos. So if you go to like our YouTube homepage, you can kind of filter by different topics you're interested in: nutrition, exercise, mindset, etc. Like all that's there. So I would love if you subscribed and checked us out and stayed kind of current with us there. And if you or a parent of yours or someone like actually wants to get really fit and work our program as we have it laid out, our websites are fitfatherproject.com and fitmotherproject.com. On there, we have our programs, our supplements. You can sign up and join the app and all that stuff. So we would love to have you. And I will just say this, like, even though we help guys like over 40 and primarily, we have hundreds, if not thousands of people in their 30s that do end up joining our programs because, hey, why not start now with the stuff that's going to be really useful and effective a little bit later? And don't get me wrong, it's still hardcore. Like our workouts are still no joke and will challenge you and push you in deep ways. So it's not just all foo-foo stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, well, guys, get all that link down there in the show notes for you guys. So, Dr. Anthony, we asked you this 2 years ago. Be curious to see how similar the answer is here today. But obviously, we end the show here with every single time with the same question. Title of our podcast is called The Superhuman Life. And over the years, that has really evolved in my understanding and meaning of what it means to live a superhuman life. And just, coming from a man of faith, I do believe that we are here for a purpose. There's a calling. There's something that each and every single one of us is supposed to be doing. But I feel so many people stop there. It's like, yeah, I'm here for a purpose. It's like, no, we must be very intentional about our growth, about our development, and then how we bring that purpose into the world in service of others. So when you pair all that together, for me, that's how I define living a superhuman life. But Dr. Anthony, as we end today's conversation, how would you define living a superhuman life?
What's amazing is just even the word superhuman, like super meaning above and human. And I guess I could think of it if I answered it from my perspective of me in my 20s when I was very ego driven. It would have been from the idea that I want to make myself superhuman. Like I want to bring myself to a superior state of being that is one that someone would look up to, maybe even revere, that I would find significance in. And I think that's just like a slight perversion of what the truth is. And I think the truth is that we all have this amazing potential within us. And I think what we're here to do is both create that in ourselves through our authentic expression and also help ignite that in others and celebrate others. So, insofar as a superhuman life, I believe you cannot do that in isolation. You're doing that in connection with all of the other people. And I think, insofar as I can be here and celebrate your greatness, Frank, and everyone else's greatness, like that's honestly superhuman. And we don't talk about like maybe the most superhuman, at least in my understanding, would be Jesus Christ. Like that was a life that was lived and literally died for others, for all, out of love. It wasn't for his individual glory, I guess you could say. It was for all of us. So, insofar as I think we can all embody that real service mentality, I think that's what gets us to transcend the ego, which can be great on certain levels, but it can't be great into these higher realms because it's inherently limited. So, it's this expression of love, service, authentic greatness. It is living the spiritual life on a daily basis. The superhuman life is actually completely mundane in the sense that it's waking up, drinking your water, getting your workouts in, chasing your dreams. And I think stacked up over the course of everything, those ordinary moments end up being extraordinary. And you're going to make other people better in the process, which is the connected aspect that I think is the spiritual truth of the baseline.
Mic drop. Amen to that, brother. God, this has been incredible, guys. One of my favorite conversations of all time. And I'm not just saying that to flatter you, man. 227 episodes. I enjoyed this one to the highest degree, brother. So thankful for you, to connecting with you years back, to having a team reach out, back out. I'm so just incredibly grateful that we can share this with our audience here today. So, guys, if you got value out of this, this is what I'm going to ask you to share as much as you possibly can. Get it out there in the world. But for Dr. Anthony, Coach Frank here, we love you guys. See you next week.